Okay, so we've got Jackson Bevins on the line now, and we're going to talk about Jackson and I's upcoming show called Deep Balls, which is kind of an extension of Jackson's old NFL picks column, but we're going to start doing it in podcast form. As you may know, Jackson is a very accomplished picker when it comes to NFL games. He's got his system down, and I'm going to have him spout off some of his stats, but he's got a really good hit rate. It's going to help you guys in your office pools, picking games, and should just be a lot of fun to kind of talk through every week and talk about matchups and things like that. So, Jackson, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, so we talked to Rob Staten a little earlier about Kenny and him are going to be doing a college football podcast this year.
I am so looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And so as I alluded to earlier, we're kind of expanding some of our coverage, and I'm really stoked to start doing the NFL picks column, or podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited to be doing it with you, man.
I'm excited to listen. How's that?
A lot of excitement here, getting real in the field goal.
So for today, I wanted to just kind of go through every division.
And when can people listen to Deep Balls?
Okay, so Deep Balls is going to be a Wednesday podcast. We're going to be recording on Wednesdays. We haven't ironed out exactly how long the cast is going to be. I think it's going to we'll have to feel it out organically and see how long it takes. But basically, we'll be running through the schedule and talking about games and giving our predictions. And so we catch that either on Wednesday nights or Thursday mornings before the Thursday night game hits. And hopefully everyone enjoys it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, let's go ahead. For today, we kind of, instead of doing any picks, it's a little early for that. We wanted to just kind of run through some of the conferences, some of the divisions, talk about which teams we like the most. So, Jackson, I'm just going to kind of start it with the AFC East. The defending champion Patriots, probably the favorites out of the AFC East. Obviously, the Dolphins have added some offensive weapons. They've added Ndamukong Suh. The Jets revamped their defense. They're already strong defense, and obviously the Bills have a really strong defense as well. What are some of your thoughts on the AFC East?
Yeah, the East should be more interesting this year than it's been in the past. As everyone knows, the Patriots have had a stranglehold on that division for the last decade and a half, and I expect them to be the best team in the division again this year. I don't think they will be as good as last year. Missing Revis is going to affect them a lot. The difference between them 2 years ago and last year in pass defense is fairly large, and I think Revis had a whole lot to do with that. Mm-hmm. Also there's a chance they might lose a game or two early in the season that they wouldn't have otherwise lost if Brady's suspension is upheld. So there's that to consider as well. They're very, very thin at wide receiver to start the season with LaFell and Edelman and Amendola all dealing with injuries. I mean, to the point where they just signed Reggie Wayne. So the door has creaked open. I think Miami's probably the team best suited to walk through it if anyone does, and that's because they're the only team that's got a quarterback of the other three. I think there's going to be three very good defenses between the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins. I think the Bills might have one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the NFL. In fact, I would say Seattle's probably the only team with a better defense than the Bills. And with Rex Ryan, I do think that he is a good coach, but they don't know who their quarterback is. I mean, they might say they do, but they really don't seem to know. The Jets certainly don't know, which is a shame because I think that I think they got a lot better everywhere else in the offseason. But Miami's super interesting because I think Tannehill showed in the last half of last season that he's a capable NFL in the world. So when you get one, that's why you pay him. And they're helping him out. He's got a very good running back next to him in Lamar Miller. They drafted Jay Ajayi. And brought in LaMichael James behind him. So there's some talent there, and they definitely improved the receiving core. Jarvis Landry was very exciting rookie last year. They added Jordan Cameron if he can stay healthy. That's another big weapon there. And there's a lot to like about what they can do. Obviously, Ndamukong Suh is going to change the nature of that defense that was already okay. I think he can make them a good defense. And so, I'm going to say I still think New England comes out of it because they've got the best quarterback and they've got the best system. But I think the Dolphins will push them and probably finish within a game.
I actually think that I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Bills win the division. I think that just that small window of opportunity with Brady being out for 4 games, assuming that he is, I actually think, just like Jackson said, they have the second best defense in the NFL, and I actually think Tyrod Taylor is going to win the job and be okay. I don't think he's going to be good, but I think he's going to be okay, and I think that because they have LaShawn McCoy and Sammy Watkins, they have a couple of good options around to help them out. And I think, it's not going to be like super pretty, but maybe like first-ish, like maybe something similar to the Seahawks in 2012 in that first half of the season when Russell Wilson, he wasn't great yet, and but they were still just barely getting it done. And then I think that as Taylor sort of figures it out a little bit more, they'll be able to win enough games at the end to win the division. I still think that Miami is not as great on defense, and I don't think the Jets are really very good at all. So I would say maybe Buffalo sneaks in at 10-6, or maybe the Patriots also go at 10-6, and there's a tiebreaker. But I think Buffalo makes the playoffs for the first time since in this century.
Do you guys think that Percy Harvin is going to have an impact, Jackson?
Oh, I think he'll definitely have an impact. The issue with Percy Harvin, besides health, obviously, is finding ways to get him the ball that are productive. Seattle really struggled with that, but Minnesota didn't. When he was, there's a real sour taste in a lot of Seahawks fans' minds and in a lot of our audience's minds about Percy Harvin, but this is a guy that was extraordinarily productive in a number of different ways in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Seattle kind of had an offensive identity that they tried to shoehorn him into, and then when that didn't quite fit, they tried to adapt the identity to fit him, and it never really meshed. But in Buffalo, I see no reason why not. And, if you've got a healthy Percy Harvin and a healthy LaShawn McCoy, you're talking about two of the toughest people in the NFL to bring down in the open field. And, if they're able to scheme a way to get people into the open field the way that Chan Gailey did for C.J. Spiller 3 years back, there's a chance for them to actually score a lot of points without ever having to chuck it down the field too much. So the potential is there. And Kenny, to your point, I mean, the Bills were number 2 in defensive DVOA last year, obviously behind the Seahawks, but they were also number 4 in special teams, whereas Miami, who I think is the other contender, they were dead last in special teams by DVOA. And one thing, if you follow the Pete Carroll philosophy, how important special teams is, and I think teams are starting to realize that it really is a big impact on the game. So there's a lot of things set up that if Buffalo, who's 26th in offense last year, can even be league average, they won 9 games having one of the worst offenses in the NFL last year. So there's a lot of potential for them to kind of make the leap and maybe win 11 games.
Danny, if we wrapped up the AFC East right now, what would you say? Do you want to be safe and go with Jackson and not take chances in life, or you want to go out on a limb where I am, where the fruit is?
Jesus. I'm going to go ahead and stay safe on this one. I think the Patriots are going to win the division again, but I'm actually with you, Kenny, that the Bills will definitely be a contender there. I've thought for a while they're like in terms of you always hear the expression one player away, one quarterback away. They're really a quarterback away from being a really good team. I think they like you guys pointed out.
My thing with Tyrod Taylor and why I would like him, say, over Ryan Fitzpatrick is there is not really. I mean, I would be surprised if he's a great player, but at the same time, there is not really any reason for us to think that he couldn't be. He's just had 4 years in Baltimore. He has no chance to start, and maybe just like Russell Wilson, maybe he was just drafted too low or overlooked for too long, and didn't get the opportunity like Wilson did, and maybe that was 4 years of backing up Flacco and working for John Harbaugh have turned him into a pretty good player. I think that he's been pretty decent in the preseason, and I think that they're not gonna make him throw the ball 500 times. If he starts, he's gonna throw it 400 times, 350 times, and they're gonna copy Seattle in a way. So I think that Rex Ryan is not the best coach, and maybe was a little overrated in New York, but I think he can I think Buffalo is better than they were last year, and last year they were 9-7. I think New England's a little worse, so I just see that sort of evening itself out to Buffalo getting 10 wins and making the playoffs.
I think it's like. Go ahead, Jackson.
Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, to your point about Buffalo being a quarterback away, truly, I think that if they had a top 8 quarterback, they might be my pick to come out of the AFC.
Right.
But I don't. It's so important to have a quarterback, and you just don't make the playoffs without a decent quarterback. You just don't do it. And I'm going to reserve having them jump, the most dominant team of the last 15 years until they show that they have a quarterback. And as far as playing it safe versus going out with Kenny, this podcast is going to be about making money and winning office pools, not trying to impress people with outlandish picks.
Exactly.
Of course. But, at the same time, I don't want anyone to think that I'm not an expert. I am an expert.
All right, on that note.
I don't think anyone doubts your expertise.
Okay, good.
On that note, let's move to the AFC North. This is an interesting division pretty much every year.
Playing that one?
That would be the Ravens, Steelers, Browns, and Bengals. You may remember last year that at one point, pretty late in the season, everyone was tied for first place.
Yep.
So this is a competitive, really tough division as usual. Let's just go right into it. Jackson, who's your favorite in that division?
Steelers.
Okay.
But I don't think it's because the Steelers are going to be really good. I think the Steelers are going to have one of the 5 or 6 worst defenses in the NFL. But they have by far the best offense. I don't know that a team constructed that way can win the Super Bowl, but a team constructed that way can win a division. And
the Colts.
They had the 3rd worst defense in the NFL last year and won 11 games. And I think that there's no reason to think their offense will be any worse this year. So
is that by
they were
DVOA?
They were number 2 offense in the NFL by DVOA last year.
Okay, and then 3rd worst in DVOA offense?
In defense. 3rd worst in defense, 2nd best in offense.
Wow.
But like I said, I mean, they won 11 games and the division doing that last year. So
yeah.
I think that Roethlisberger to Antonio Brown is the single most efficient quarterback wide receiver combination in the NFL. Le'Veon is definitely searching for a post Polamalu defensive identity, but in my mind there's no reason to think that they can't win 10, 11 games again. But the team that'll push them will be Baltimore.
Yeah. Kenny, what do you think of that? What do you think of the AFC North?
I do think that the offense will be a little worse, and I'm a little concerned that 2 players have been now suspended for the start of the season with Martavis Bryant and Le'Veon Bell. Bell being out 2 games, Bryant looking to serve a 4-game suspension. I think that
they're also out without Marquise Pouncey.
Yeah, no Pouncey. So, and Ben Roethlisberger is a fragile guy. So, I think that I would be concerned that their offense is a little bit worse, and that their defense is not a little bit better. There's just some things going on in Pittsburgh that make me concerned and shy away from picking them, and I would probably go with Baltimore. But I'll be rooting for Cleveland. So.
Yeah, Baltimore is an interesting team. I'm trying to look at them this year roster-wise versus last year, and I don't know where they got better. I mean, Pittsburgh would have, in my mind, Pittsburgh would have to get worse by a bit for Baltimore to jump them. Kenny, do you think, or Danny, do you think Baltimore's gotten better?
Well, that's a good question. I'm looking at their roster right now, and I'm trying to figure out. I mean, they drafted Rashad Perryman, but they lost Torrey Smith. Sounds
and I think they were a little jilted last season with the Ray Rice stuff. They weren't expecting it. It came. Right. They had to change their whole offense. So I think that just by way of going a whole offseason knowing that what their situation is, not knowing that one of their star players was going to be out for the whole year, just the fact that they know some more about the team that's going to be out there, I think just that alone will make their offense a little bit better. As far as personnel, I guess Danny can list it out, but I don't even really know who they added.
Well, I'm trying to look through their roster here, and I'm not seeing anything like major. I mean, obviously
they traded Haloti Ngata.
Right. So I mean, that's definitely one concern. Yeah, it's such a tough division just because there was so much parity last year. I mean, even the Browns were really in it till the end, and then obviously we haven't even mentioned the Bengals, who, seem to contend every year, and obviously there's the whole Andy Dalton playoffs thing, and that's kind of probably going to be a narrative again this year. But yeah, I'm with Jackson on the Steelers. I think they could contend for the whole AFC crown this year.
I actually think that overall, though, the division is I thought it was pretty overrated last year. I mean, you look at the fact that they dominated the NFC South, so they all won all those games. And then they were close. So what? Even sending 3 teams to the playoffs, I felt like, yeah, because you played the worst divisions. And
and the AFC was down. The AFC was not a good conference last year. It was the most top heavy I can remember a conference being.
They sent 3 teams to the playoffs. None of them made it to the AFC Championship game. I don't even know. I know the Bengals lost in the first round. I just think that it's a little bit of a mirage. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure yet if I think that the Steelers are legitimate contenders, but they might be.
Fair enough. Moving on to the AFC South. This was one of the worst divisions in football last year, obviously with the NFC South. But the Titans, Jaguars, Colts, and Texans. The Titans picked up a new quarterback in Marcus Mariota. The Jaguars, the Gus Bradley plan's in action. It seems like they've picked up some weapons there. You like kind of some of the things they've done, but they haven't really put anything together at this point. The Colts are the Colts. They've got Andrew Luck. They picked up Frank Gore, Andre Johnson this offseason. Added some guys in the draft. Philip Dorsett. And then obviously you have the Texans, J.J. Watt, great defense, questionable offense with, again, it's the quarterback question. So, Jackson, out of the AFC South, I mean, I'm guessing you're going to go with the Colts, but what are some of your thoughts on the AFC South?
Yeah, the AFC South is just kind of easy pickings right now. I do think compete with a healthy Arian Foster and a healthy Jadeveon Clowney added to that mix. We don't know what that team looks like yet, but we are still talking about a consensus top 10 defense with some legitimate playmakers on offense. I mean, they've still got a very good offensive line. A healthy Arian Foster is still very, very dangerous, and Nuke Hopkins is going to get a chance to prove that he's the number 1 receiver in the NFL this year, and I see no reason to think that he's not. The question is going to be about getting him the ball, obviously, but I think Brian Hoyer is kind of in a position for that quarterback job. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, he got named
on Hard Knocks, but Brian Hoyer. Okay, he's just seems like kind of a placeholder quarterback, but I mean, he was as effective in Cleveland as anyone's been in I don't know how long.
At one point, he ended terribly. Over his last 7 games, he had 2 touchdowns, 9 interceptions.
Totally, yeah. But, I mean, that was, stripped of Gordon and Cameron. He literally had nobody to throw to at the end. I don't know, how many quarterbacks put up much better numbers, but I do hear your point. But the Texans are the only team that I see pushing the Colts. And the Colts are in a position where they've been good enough to win their division with Andrew Luck, but have some obvious shortcomings when it comes to winning playoff football. And as evidenced by losing, by more than 5 touchdowns in the AFC Championship game, that's where you get when you have a young quarterback where you push chips to the middle of the table, and they did that by bringing in those players Danny mentioned. I mean, they're they are positioning themselves to compete for the AFC title, not just for the division title. And, I feel bad starting off these predictions with 3 straight incumbents, but, in these 3 divisions, I really do see last year's champion repeating, and that would mean the Colts.
Kenny? Did we lose Kenny? All right, well, we'll just go ahead and continue on, Jackson. What's that?
Do you have the Colts winning the division?
I do, yeah. I think, like you said, the Texans could give them a run for their money. Last year they did, in fact, kind of late into the year, push for the playoffs a little bit. But, again, it's the quarterback question. I don't really know if, is Brian Hoyer more than just a Jag? And that'll be a question that we'll, get answered this year when he has a little bit more, a few more weapons to throw to this year, and I think that'll tell us a little bit more about him. And but yeah, I'm picking the Colts for that division for sure. And then I think, when it comes to the Jaguars, I think they could be better this year. I think they could maybe win, 6 or 7 games or something like that. But I don't see them pushing for the playoffs at this point. So. I'm going with the Colts in the South. So moving to the AFC West, this is an interesting division to me. I think that I just got a text from Kenny. He said his computer restarted, so he'll be back with us in a minute here. So the AFC West, interesting division. The Broncos, Chargers, and Chiefs, I think all, have some of the talent to contend in the division. They all have, the Broncos and Chargers have really good quarterbacks, in my opinion. I think the Chiefs have a good quarterback in Alex Smith, a guy that they can win with, but it's not necessarily going to win them games. I'm kind of a big Phillip Rivers fan, so I think the Chargers have a shot. But yeah, that's an interesting division. Obviously, a lot depends on kind of what you get from Peyton Manning. What are you thinking of the AFC West?
I think it's the Chiefs' division to lose this year. Denver has been very good as we know. Over the last since they got Peyton Manning, they're consistently one of the 3-4 best teams in the NFL. But we saw some real disturbances in the force with Manning down the stretch last year.
Yeah.
And some say it's because he had a quad injury and couldn't step into his throws, and I'm sure there's some of that. But in December in the NFL, everybody is banged up. And for Peyton Manning, who has been losing velocity on his throws over the last few years, being unable to step into it, the arm strength isn't there to accommodate that anymore. And, it's getting harder and harder for him to connect on deep passes. The good news for him is he's got some insanely talented wide receivers in Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders to throw to.
Yeah.
And that gives you a large margin of error. But, they lost Julius Thomas, who is a total weapon as that flex tight end.
Mm-hmm.
And, defensively, they got a year older. I don't know that they got better anywhere. So I think the window is open there. I can see them losing 2 or 3 games this year that they wouldn't have lost last year or the year before. And I think the Chiefs did get better. I mean, they had 0 wide receiver production last year. I mean, wide receivers didn't catch a touchdown. Their yards per target was super low.
Yeah.
And that everyone is so quick to put that on Alex Smith. But, I mean, who is he supposed to throw to? He's got Dexter McCluster and Dwayne Bowe, who looked every bit washed up. And
right.
Who else is he throwing to? Little guys. He's got Travis Kelce, and they started to develop a really nice rapport towards the back half of the season. No reason to think that doesn't continue this year.
Right.
But they added Jeremy Maclin, and this is an offense that, with no wide receiver production, was still 12th best in the NFL last year. Their defense seems every bit as good. Eric Berry back healthy, Justin Houston, obviously. Ton of talent on that team. And, in addition to that, they were number 3 in special teams DVOA last year, which, is kind of the swing vote for a lot of teams. And we saw it last year when the Seahawks went to Arrowhead. They are a stingy team that can run. I mean, they ran the ball on Seattle as well as any team has in the last 3 years. So I think that they could win 11, 12 games this year.
Wow. Okay, so we got our first kind of upset here. I think you said you're picking the Chiefs in that division, didn't you?
Yeah, I do, and I like the Chargers. And I think the Chargers will probably start hot with like a 6-2 first half, as they're wont to do. But I don't see that anything has changed in the composition of that team to make me believe that all of a sudden they're going to be good in December when they never have been.
Yeah, well said. Well,
yeah, I guess I cut out in the middle of the AFC South. I'll just say that I'm picking the Colts. I assume everyone else is.
That's correct.
I do think the Texans. I think Brian Hoyer is a bad quarterback. I think Ryan Mallett will be the quarterback, and he won't be much better by like week 4. So, just not so sure about the Texans as a wild card, but I do like them in theory. And then for the AFC West, I appreciate what Jackson's going for with the Chiefs. I don't necessarily want to disagree. I guess I would just hang my horse, as it were, to just more of Peyton Manning and Von Miller, and just that's kind of what I'll just say. I'll just stay safe in this one. I don't think I guess the Chargers are kind of interesting. Melvin Gordon could be a nice addition, and I do think Philip Rivers is underrated, as a lot of people are down on him, and the defense might be better this year, but. I'll stick with Denver.
Yeah, and this one's tough for me, I think, honestly, because I definitely agree with a lot of the things that Jackson said about the Chiefs. I think their defense is the best probably in that division, and they added some weapons. They got some good stuff going on offense. But I still like the Broncos in the West, and that's kind of projecting a little bit that Peyton will bounce back a little bit. So, I mean, that's a really tough one, because I think the Broncos go as Peyton goes. And, if his arm is what it was in the second half of last year, then I don't see them being the powerhouse that they've been. But if it really was an injury, if it really was like fighting through whatever it was that, they say contributed to that, then I think they could really bounce back. I like their defense a lot. I think they got some really good pass rushing weapons on that team, and I think that's huge as you guys know with the Seahawks. And so, yeah.
Honestly, Denver's and one thing that so few people bring up when talking about the Broncos, they might have the most underrated defensive player in the league in Chris Harris Jr.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point.
That guy has like a legit claim to being the best cornerback in the NFL, and he's another one of those guys that's totally unheralded coming out of college, and
he was undrafted, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he's amazing. He's as sticky as they get, and that does a lot. I mean, we saw how good they could be when Champ Bailey was playing really well at corner, and the ability to, what that does to free up the rest of the athletes on that defense. Chris Harris is playing like peak Champ Bailey. So, I just, I hear so many people talk about the Broncos, and he never gets mentioned, and I just wanted to mention him because I think he's awesome.
And he's listening right now, so he appreciates that. Let's just go ahead. I think we've gotten through the AFC, and I would just say that my 6 playoff teams would be the division winners: Buffalo, Baltimore, Indianapolis, and Denver, and my 2 wild cards: New England and Kansas City.
That's fair to me. Yeah.
What do you think for the wild cards?
My wild card teams probably be I do have the Broncos still getting in, and it's a tough one between the Ravens and the Dolphins for me, but I'm going to go with Miami. So I've got your 4 division winners being Patriots, Steelers, Colts, and Chiefs, and then I've got Denver and Miami getting in the wild card spots.
Man, this is tough. I'm going to go with, obviously, I picked the Patriots, Steelers, Colts, and Broncos. I'm going to go ahead and pick the Ravens and Chargers as the wild card teams.
Interesting. I like that we...
Sorry, not the Chargers, the Chiefs.
Oh, okay.
My bad. I actually meant the Chiefs.
Less interesting. I was going to say we all picked different wild cards, which means it's competitive. But
I was looking at the Chargers and thinking Chiefs, but yeah. So those are my picks.
Let's move over to the NFC, and Jackson, what do you think of the NFC East?
Man, I think it's a pretty bad division with a good team in it. I love the Eagles. I'm such a believer in Chip Kelly, not just as like a successful head coach, but I see him and Pete Carroll as kind of being like seminal coaches on the historical timeline of NFL development. Like what Chip Kelly's bringing to the NFL, there's a lot of like just common sense. Like if you strip the history and the way that things have always been done, and everyone was starting from scratch on figuring out how to play NFL football, the Chip Kelly system makes a ton of sense. And it's a system that requires a lot of buy-in, but that hasn't been an issue. There's been a total carousel at quarterback, and yet they just go out and have won a bunch of games under him. And it's a style that still has played well in the cold weather. I think their defense will be a lot better this year. They've got a very good front seven, but their secondary struggled so much last year. And now they've got Byron Maxwell, and they've got Walter Thurmond, which, most of the folks listening to this podcast don't need to be educated on how good those guys are. They're going to be much better in the one position that they struggled at last year. They lost LaShawn McCoy, but they replaced him with DeMarco Murray, Ryan Matthews. They added, they still got Sproles. Jordan Matthews came on as a stud last year. I think Zach Ertz is a weapon. There's a lot to like with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think that they're a team that, is probably one of the 2 or 3 best in the NFC.
You're not high on the Cowboys then?
I do like the Cowboys. I think that it's easy to sell the impact that DeMarco Murray had short on that team. Say, oh, well, behind that line, look at the lanes and whatever. People don't understand how dependent that offense was on DeMarco Murray. He had like 440-some touches last year. Like, that's a number that just doesn't exist in the modern NFL anymore. That's a ton of touches. They're expecting Julius Randle and Darren McFadden and potentially Gus Johnson to fill. That's a ton of production, and I don't think it's as simple as plug and play. I think DeMarco Murray is a truly special talent. So I do like the Cowboys. I love their offensive line. I am a Romo fan. Dez Bryant's one of my favorite players. But I don't know. 22nd in defense last year. I don't know where they got better on defense this year. I think they got worse on offense, losing Murray. So I think the Eagles got better. I think the Cowboys got a little worse, and that's why I'm choosing them.
I like it. Kenny, what are your thoughts on the East?
Yeah, I'll pick the Eagles, which means it'll probably be the Giants.
He's not the best color man in the league, folks. The East is tough for me because I like the Cowboys and the Eagles, but I think I'm going to have to agree with both of you. I think the Eagles are going to be tough this year. I actually think that Sam Bradford's going to be pretty good in that system. So I'm going with the Eagles as well. I like the Cowboys a lot. I think they could both it might come down to the wire between both those teams, but as Jackson said, I think the Cowboys' defense is going to be a liability, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Did the Cowboys kind of capture lightning in a bottle last year with their run game, or is it something that they can continue going forward and not miss a beat? That's a big question in my mind.
When was the last time a team won the NFC East 2 years in a row? I feel like it's been since the Donovan McNabb Eagles.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Thank you.
But, yeah, I don't know. I don't think that the Giants are going to factor in, and obviously I don't think Washington is going to factor in. And I think RG3's. I don't know what happened to him. It was crazy because he was so good his rookie year, and then obviously he tore his ACL and just hasn't been the same since.
Everything that people said was going to happen to Russell Wilson happened to Robert Griffin.
Yeah. So that's an interesting
game too, man, because I think that he ended up in one of the most dysfunctional organizations in professional sports, and that's really hard for a quarterback to overcome. I mean, he had by quarterback efficiency, the greatest rookie season in NFL history. It's not like he was just some college guy who benefited from the system and couldn't make the transfer. I mean, they hosted a playoff game with very little surrounding talent his rookie year. It's but they're constantly switching the offense. His coaches they just kill him publicly. There's no reason to trust leadership in that organization. There's no reason to trust the system. The best thing for Robert Griffin III is to go somewhere else as soon as he gets an opportunity, and I'm trying to reserve judgment on him as a player until then. That organization sucks.
Indeed.
On that note, let's move to the NFC North because I like ending that on that one. The NFC North is super interesting to me. I think all the teams in the division
got a lot more interesting last week.
Indeed, it did. Who's your pick in that division, Jackson?
It's still the Packers, but by less of a margin than pre-Jordy Nelson.
Right. That was what you were alluding to, I assume.
Yeah. I still think that they probably have one of the 2 or 3 best offensive lines in the NFL. I think Eddie Lacy is a bona fide every down lead back in the NFL, and he's still young. With
Fat Eddie Lacy.
What's that? Fat
Eddie Lacy.
Yeah.
People just
man. Off. I mean, he's like Jerome Bettis fat though. Yeah. Hey, seriously, he's the modern day Jerome Bettis, and they have an offense that suits that. It's an offense that, at least in the past, you obviously can't gear up against the run with all those weapons. Jordy Nelson probably being one of the 5 or 6 best receivers in the NFL over the last 5 years. Randall Cobb emerging as maybe the best slot receiver in the NFL. And Devontae Adams is a guy that Aaron Rodgers can't stop talking about. Oh, yeah, and they have Aaron Rodgers. That's a team that is, I thought, pre-Jordy Nelson was the one team top to bottom roster-wise that could compete with the Seahawks from a pure talent perspective. But I think that losing Jordy Nelson is going to have a big effect. I think teams are going to be able to anticipate run a little bit better. And as I'm sure Kenny is waiting to jump in and say, Aaron Rodgers has struggled against the best defenses in the NFL. And, losing Jordy Nelson certainly isn't going to help that.
Kenny? Don't tell me what I'm going to say.
Oh. Is that what you were going to say?
Oh. No, I was kidding. Come on, guys, what's light? Keep it light. No, I mean, yeah, he does struggle against good defense on the road, and because of that, the whole team suffers because they don't have anything else. I think that the Packers are going to win the division, but I think the season gets decided for the NFC North. I think the season is decided on November 15th. The Lions go to Lambeau. And if the Lions can beat Green Bay and Lambeau, then they finally deserve to win the division. If they can't, then they don't. But I think it'll be a close, maybe one game difference, and the Lions need to win in Green Bay in order to prove themselves that they're finally over the hump.
Do you know when the last time the Lions beat the Packers in Lambeau?
I forget.
Like 1990 or something?
Yeah, it's something ridiculous.
And I agree that the Lions are the team that they'll be competing with. I thought Green Bay was comfortably 2 games better than the Lions before the Jordy Nelson injury. But what's hard for me, and I just the common denominator between successful NFL teams and unsuccessful NFL teams is the quarterback. And that is, Detroit's going to have to be a lot better everywhere else to overcome the gap between Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford. They've got in theory, a very good offense, but even so, they were 19th last year, and
that's crazy.
Second to worst in special teams. Yeah, you look at all the names in Detroit, but they are so horribly inefficient on offense. And Matthew Stafford is just a volume producer. He's not a good decision maker. He's got a big arm, but it's not a particularly accurate arm. He has been his quarterback rating without having a Calvin Johnson, I got to think would be bottom 3rd in the NFL. So I just don't – I love Amir Abdullah. I think Golden Tate is awesome. I think the offense, again, in theory, should be good. They'll score points and put up a lot of yards. But I just don't think Matt Stafford is a good enough quarterback to overtake the Packers.
I mean, I would probably disagree. I just think I think Amir Abdullah was a huge addition. They haven't been right since on offense since Javid Best got concussed and basically retired. Before that, they were they were great. They were 5-1, 5-0 in this first 5 games, and then he got hurt, and then they haven't been the same since. They tried to do it with Reggie Bush. It didn't work because Reggie Bush isn't very good. And then they added, and I think Abdullah will be the difference, but also the difference will be Calvin Johnson staying healthy for 16 games, and Eric Ebron, I think, is going to have a breakout season.
I wonder how different their defense is going to be this year, because they were so good last year on defense, suffocating, and I think that really got them. That was what got them to where they were in terms of challenging.
They trailed only the Seahawks and the Bills in defense last year, but
that was a good defense.
They lost the main reason for that.
Yeah, and that's the question: is like, how big of a difference is it losing Sue going to make?
I would venture to say that there is no more valuable skill on defense than pressure on the quarterback right up the middle. And there's only 3-4 guys in the NFL that can consistently collapse a pocket from the center.
And Haloti Ngata has been one of them.
That's true. That's true. Do you see how big of a gap do you see between Sue and Ngata?
I mean, it's something, but I always I don't know. I've been scared off of elite defensive tackles since Albert Hainsworth. So I've sort of just been scared off the whole elite defensive tackle just because it's such a brutal position to play. It's just so much depends on being in the right scheme and coaches using you well. But I do think that because Detroit has the same coaches and the proper system that they had last year, that's still in there. I think that the two players themselves at this stage in their career might be separated by a lot, but I think there's a chance that Sue gets worse in Miami and that Ngata gets better in Detroit.
Interesting. I think, I'm going with the Packers in this division. I think the Lions are going to challenge them, and those teams both could make the playoffs.
DeAndre Levy, huge underrated player. I mean, he's always like kind of in the top 100, but still, I think he's like.
We don't talk about him very much.
They don't talk about him.
One thing too, I don't want to sleep too hard on the Vikings. Which divisions without talking about how much better I think they'll be. I think they'll beat the Lions and the Packers each once this year. I think with Peterson, and I really like Teddy Bridgewater. Like, I really like Teddy Bridgewater. I think their offense is going to be much better than it was last year. I see them as a surprise 8-win team with the potential to win 9.
There we go. And I was actually going to add that as well. And I actually think the Bears. There's so many question marks around the Bears this year, but they're going to be one of my teams to watch just because, new system, new coordinator, new coaches. I think that a lot rides on how Cutler ends up playing, but I think he's, still a talented player, talented quarterback if he can keep his head on straight, which, obviously in the past he hasn't really done. But I think the Bears could be another team that are better than people think they're going to be. And I don't think they're going to win the division, but I think they're not going to be as much of a pushover as a lot of people are making them out to be this year. So the NFC North, to me, is a very interesting division, very tough division. And moving from there, we get to a not very tough division in the NFC South. Last year, I want to say the winning team in the division was 7-9, and that was the Carolina Panthers. They snuck in. Am I right on that? They were 7-9, right?
Yeah, they were.
That was just off the top of my head. But
7-8. Yeah, they were 7-8-1.
7-8-1. There you go. So so that's an interesting division. I think the Saints have taken a couple steps back, even from last year, just losing Jimmy Graham, trading away some of their stuff, and releasing Junior Galette, things like that. They seem to be in, they're up against the ropes right now. They could maybe punch their way out, but I don't know. I think the Falcons are going to be better. I think the Falcons are probably the best team in that division to me. I think after Kelvin Benjamin went down, the Falcons overtook the Panthers. I think I would have picked the Panthers before that, but I think I believe in Dan Quinn. I think he can kind of turn that defense around. I think he's got some pieces on that defense that he could really use, and I think they already had a good offense. Their passing offense is pretty loaded with Julio Jones, Roddy White, and Matt Ryan, and so to me this is a really interesting division, and I think I'm going to be picking the Falcons. Jackson, what do you think?
Yeah, the Falcons too. I think that I think Julio Jones is, if we're going to dip toes into the fantasy pool, the only guy I've got rated higher than him is Antonio Brown. I think from a pure physical ability standpoint, he might be the best wide receiver in the NFL, and that just is so valuable these days. I mean, he was double covered all last year and still just put up absurd numbers. But I'm picking the Falcons more because of the rest of the division than because I think the Falcons are a really good team. They had no running game to speak of last year. They did invest, with Tevin Coleman. They've got Devontae Freeman, Anton Smith, guys who were productive in small shots last year. I think they'll run better, but they had the worst defense in the NFL last year, and that's a tough thing to bounce back from. The issue is that the offenses they're going to face, the Saints presumably got worse, losing, like you said, Jimmy Graham, Pierre Thomas, Kenny Stills. I mean, that's a ton of Drew Brees' targets that are gone now that they have to figure out who that's going to go to. The addition of C.J. Spiller, I think, is very nice, but I still think there's some drop-offs. I think Brandon Cooks is going to be an absolute stud, but they don't play defense either, and losing Junior Gillette doesn't make things any easier in that regard. The Panthers, I think, are probably the team best poised to, win the division from the Falcons. But losing Kelvin Benjamin's a huge deal. I mean, I think that he had a higher percentage of his quarterback's targets, maybe than any other wide receiver in the NFL last year besides Brown. So that's a lot of targets they have to find. They lost D'Angelo Williams, which means if the ever fragile Jonathan Stewart goes down, there's a big question mark there as well. The thing to remember about the Panthers, they're only one season removed from being the number 3 team overall in the NFL by DVOA and winning 12 games. I still like Cam Newton. I don't love Cam Newton, but I do think he's a top quarterback, and that's what you need to compete. So for me, I've got Atlanta first and then Carolina second. I think the Buccaneers are better. I think a Lovie Smith Buccaneers team is going to be way better than the Rutgers coach that everyone hated. What was his name?
Well, Greg Schiano, but Lovie Smith was there last year.
Yeah, I do. But I mean, also it's like I don't think with NFL coaches that you see very often a huge shift in one season. I think it takes a little bit to put in a culture, and you need a quarterback. And I like Jameis Winston. I like Jameis Winston as a Cam Newton type player. I think that he's got a ton of talent, and Mike Evans, Vincent Jackson, if they both stay healthy, you're talking about one of the best receiver combos out there. I think Austin Seferian-Jenkins is going to develop into a weapon, and I think that Doug Martin and Charles Sims are both going to be really effective as well. So, I mean, again, I'm not talking about the Buccaneers as a contender, but I do think they win 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, me too. I'll pick the Falcons.
All right, so we're all picking the Falcons in that division, but I think we all would probably agree the Panthers are going to challenge as well.
That's probably the division I feel least confident in my champion about.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think it's, I'm not heavily pro-Falcons and thinking the Panthers are going to tank. I think it's going to come down to those two teams. I really think the Panthers have a great defense, but I just question what they'll do on offense with losing, Kelvin Benjamin and kind of having a lot of questions on the offensive line. It's going to be interesting. All right, so we'll move to the final division, the NFC West. I can guess what you're going to say on this, but let's just, let's have it. What do you think of the NFC West?
You asking me?
Yes, sorry. I am addressing Jackson here.
I think that there's a 50% chance that we see the best Seahawks team that has ever existed this year.
All right.
I think that this is probably the most, outside of the Colts, this is probably the most slam dunk division champion. The Rams have never been consistent. I don't see anything that makes me think that's any different this year. The Cardinals, I think, played with, they won all of their close games last year, and winning close games just historically, statistically, is not a repeatable skill. There's too many variables, and they came up the river every time last year. But I think you saw, they're not as good as the Seahawks. The 49ers have gone from, being half of the best rivalry in the NFL to presumably being an absolute sewage explosion this year. So I think that, the Seahawks probably win this division by a couple of games.
I think Jackson's out of his mind. I got the 49ers by at least 4 games.
Now you're just trolling.
Yeah, but I want to point out that I haven't been trolling up to this point. I don't know.
Very good job of restraining yourself.
There's not really much to add to what Jackson said. I think the Seahawks very well might have the best defense of all time if it goes right. And I got them winning the division. And I don't know that I would pick any other team for a wild card.
Fair enough. I'm going with the Seahawks as well, and I think we've kind of we've touched on the NFC West a lot, so we can kind of just leave it at that. I think people kind of know what to expect, and so that was a great kind of tour through to NFL.
Well, let's pick our 6 playoff teams because we got our 4 division winners.
NFC West.
We all picked the exact same teams, right? So we all picked Philadelphia, Green Bay, Atlanta, and Seattle. So who would your 2 wild cards be?
Jackson?
I bet you we all go with the same 6 teams here. I've got Detroit and Dallas as wild cards.
Kenny, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got Detroit. I just don't know if I'm going to go with Dallas. I just think that I think their offensive line performed above their heads last year. I do agree that losing DeMarco Murray is a bigger deal than Dallas or anyone else makes it out to be. Their defense isn't very good. So, I'm gonna.
If not them, who?
I know that's the next thing. That will be my follow up to that.
He's stalling right now.
It's because it's a tough decision. But, I do want to believe that. I think the Saints are better than people think. I think that Brandon Cooks is a breakout player this year, one of the best weapons in the NFL, but they did lose too much. So I'm going to say that it's the Minnesota Vikings.
I love it.
And I am going with the Cowboys, and I think it came down between the Cardinals and the Cowboys to me. But I agree that the Cardinals, I don't know what happened last year. They were able to they were just able to capture lightning in a bottle is a term I guess you could use, but they just wouldn't lose these games, and it was kind of crazy. So I'm going with the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys and the Lions, and those would be my 6 teams.
And taking it all the way to the end, I have the Seahawks over the Colts in just an absolute shit show blowout.
That'd be cool.
Can you imagine one of the most frustrating debates out there is the Russell Wilson versus Andrew Luck one, because it's whenever you get into these arguments or conversations, it always becomes about what one of them can't do or what their weaknesses are, and you can't just say hey, these are both really awesome young quarterbacks that are great for their teams. 2 weeks of Wilson versus Luck profiles and arguments would be just unbearable.
That would be the worst.
Yeah, I mean, we were 1 game away from it happening last year, and if the Colts didn't shit the bed against the Patriots, they would have shit the bed against the Seahawks, and it would have been a blowout. But, just in that scenario, if that did happen, you're talking about the Seahawks going to 3 straight Super Bowls and playing Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and Andrew Luck, and really being and history will forget how much different that Seahawks team was by the second half of that game because of injuries.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that.
Do you guys want to give Super Bowl picks, or are you too shy?
I'm right now, and this is just kind of a shot in the dark for me, but I picked the Steelers and the Seahawks to make it to the Super Bowl and the Seahawks to win it. I just really like their offense a lot, and I think their defense is going to be better, the Steelers, and I think the Seahawks, like you guys kind of said, are going to be the best team that I think this is going to be the best Seahawks team that we've seen. So
Jackson?
Yeah. In the AFC, I've got the Colts over the Steelers in the AFC Championship game. In the NFC, I do have the Seahawks. I have them beating the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. One thing I said in my article last week that I'll probably say a couple more times before the season starts. The Seahawks have been, accumulatively speaking, the best team in the NFL for the last 3 years. They haven't really gotten weaker anywhere in those 3 years. And Russell Wilson has had, objectively speaking, the most successful, productive first 3 years that a quarterback has ever had. And he hasn't had Jimmy Graham yet. Like this team could win 14 or 15 games even with a rough schedule. I'm not predicting that they will because there's lots of variables. You never know how injuries are going to go. Your team wins. But I think, when you look top to bottom, this is going to be one of the most talented rosters that the NFL has seen in a very, very long time. There's no surprises with the system. Everyone that matters is comfortable with it, and no reason to think that there isn't going to be any continuity. I mean, they lost that Super Bowl. I don't care how homerish this sounds. They lost that Super Bowl because they were playing at half strength on defense. There's no way that final drive goes 8 for 8 through the air against a full-strength Seahawks defense. It's never happened. It never would happen. And, I'm not taking the victory away from the Patriots. They did what they had to do to win. But this Seahawks team is going to be better than that one.
Right.
Yep, I agree.
Well, I think given that this episode of the podcast also has a good 30 to 40 minutes with Rob Staten, it would be a good idea now to wrap it up. Danny, you want to promote that show one more time?
Yeah, just again, look forward to Jackson and I are going to have our podcast on Wednesday nights, Wednesday evenings, and then we'll either post Wednesday or Thursday morning. And yeah, we're just going to go through the games. Jackson's going to give his picks. I'm going to give my picks. Jackson, if people, we'll point to it on the site, but if people have read Jackson's picks column in the past, it's excellent. He really knows his shit in terms of, how these things work. He's going to help people win their office pools and things like that. So I think it's going to be a fun time, and it'll be entertaining to just go through every game and kind of learn about every team. So yeah, what were you going to say?
Just that, his picks are crazy accurate. You got to bribe him to find out how he does it.
Yes, exactly. So look for that coming up. We'll have one out before the beginning of the season, the first week, and look for that every week.
All right.
Yeah,
thanks,
I'm really excited. I do miss the picks article, and so I'm really excited to kind of get back into that flow of looking at all the other teams. It definitely I felt it made me a more versed overall NFL fan, so I'm really eager to be doing it again. And Danny, I'm happy to be doing it with you, man.
Yeah, definitely. Likewise.
Well, you can follow Jackson at Jackson Bevins on Twitter, and also read his shit on field goals when it appears. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thanks, Jackson.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right. So that's the. Danny, me and you need to record like an intro or something.
Will you just, do you want to just do a real quick intro and then I'll just splice it all together?
Yeah, sounds good.
And Jackson, if you wanted to get off, you can.
Way ahead of you, bro.
All right. Today's the
27th.
27th. It's Thursday, August 27th, and you're listening to Real in the Field Goals, where myself, Kenneth Arthur, a writer for Field Goals, Rolling Stone, the AV Club, Sports on Earth, and Danny Kelly, managing editor at Field Goals, as well as football writer, NFL writer at SB Nation. Just talk about football, usually the Seahawks, and we are sponsored by the Ballard Agency. 50 years in the insurance business, a family-owned and operated in Kirkland, Washington. Make sure to check out the Ballard Agency. Go to ballardagency.com and tell them that Field Goals sent you. Please do this. And so today's episode is special episode where me and Danny are going to be dropping some Field Gulls podcast related news. So we talked to two of our good friends that we're going to be doing new podcasts with, and we'll have those interviews with coming up soon. Danny, any thoughts here on the new news?
Yeah, I mean, it's just exciting. We got some additional shows this year to kind of augment all of our written content at the site. So we're going to have, I guess I'll just go ahead and say, we're going to have a college football podcast with Kenny.
It's really a draft podcast.
Sorry. Yeah, we're going to have a draft podcast, NFL draft / college football / Seahawks podcast with Seahawk draft blogs, Rob Staten, a well-known guy around here, really great resource. Also a professional radio personality in Britain.
Yeah, and that's called 3000 NFL Mock Draft, and it'll be coming out Tuesdays, where me and Rob are basically going to be talking about players during the college football season and how they relate to the 2016 NFL Draft, and just sort of giving you an insight into what players you should be paying attention to, perhaps ones that'll fit on the Seahawks, who's going up, who's going down, and just basically see how someone like Rob, who does mock drafts every year, has been writing about college football as good as anybody for the last, 10, I don't know how long he's been doing it. I'm going to say 7 or 8, maybe longer years. Yeah. But also, like, if you just pay attention to Seahawks Draft Blog or what he says here on Field Gulls, he is deathly accurate. His favorite players in the draft usually go on to success. He said Frank Clark was a top 3 prospect that fell because of his off-field issues, and so far Frank Clark looks exactly like that. He predicted the thing the morning of when nobody had heard of Frank Clark. He said, well, this is going to be the guy. And also, I want to say, like, some of his favorite players in past drafts have turned out to be great. I know he wanted the Seahawks to draft Joel Bitonio last year. They didn't, but Joel obviously went on to be, in his first rookie season, just one of the best guards in football.
Yeah, it's going to be a really great podcast. I can't wait to hear that. Can't wait to I think it'll make everyone a little more prepared during the year to really gear up for the draft. And so that's going to be great. The other thing that we're going to start doing, Jackson Bevins and I are going to do a NFL Picks podcast every week, going through the entire schedule of that week and breaking down games and giving our picks. Jackson's had a picks column in the past that people really loved. He kind of ran out of time in terms of real life took over. In terms of writing that article, but I think this is a better way to kind of try and get that information out without having to spend 7 hours or whatever it is writing an article. So look for that coming up every week as well. And that is called Deep Balls.
Right. That is 3000 NFL Mock Draft and Deep Balls. Those things you can look out for sure. And then Danny and myself also might be doing some immediate reaction post-game stuff.
Yeah.
After the Seahawks games this year. So also make sure to pay attention to that. I know a lot of people come to Field Gulls anyway after every game, so it'll just be there, I think. So there's that. So it's a long podcast today, so let's just get right to it. Exactly. And throw it over to us talking to Rob. We promote the show, but also after 2 preseason games, Rob gives a lot of great insight on these young players. Okay, so that was our interview with Rob. Make sure to check out 3000 NFL Mock Draft coming out on Tuesdays this year. And so that was that. Now let's go ahead and transition over to Danny and Jackson and I giving our picks for the entire season. We're going to pick every division winner, Super Bowl champion, and that's the 3 of us doing that for about an hour. So sit tight and listen to this. All right, so that was our interview with Jackson. I want to thank Rob and Jackson for coming on to the show today to promote their new podcast with us, respectively, myself and Danny. So make sure to check out 3000 NFL Mock Draft as well as Deep Balls. Those will be on Tuesday and Wednesday this season, as well as some immediate reaction show with me and Danny after every game. And Danny, any final thoughts?
No, I think that's good. We covered everything, and let's just let people go at this point.
All right, sounds good. Remember that the Reel on the Field Goals is presented by the Ballard Agency in Kirkland, Washington. Tell them that Field Goals sent you. Go to ballardagency.com. When it's time to any kind of insurance you need, go to them and tell them that we sent you. So do that. And also follow me at Kenneth Arthur S. Danny at Field Goals. Go to fieldgoals.com. Send us $100 and all of that.
$100 bill.
A Chris $100. And you'll still get Reel on the Field Goals every week, coming back next Thursday. Thanks for listening.